Hello. Hello, Nandini. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me clearly? No? Is it
Hello.
okay?
Yes, sir. I can hear you clearly.
Nandini, is it okay?
Yes, sir. It's okay. It's all fine. And
But
am I
some,
audible to all?
but
Yes,
something is,
yes.
yeah, audible to all, but it's cracking sometimes. I don't know where from this coming.
Sir,
Anyway, go ahead.
your headphone. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nandini.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Nandini Day. Welcomes you all in this beautiful summer evening. I welcome our honorable chief guest, esteemed guest of honors, and all the valuable participants in this webinar presented by Professional Institute of Business, Bangladesh, named Emerging Understanding of Emotional Intelligence Among Teenagers. Emotional intelligence, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it, it is known as the ability to use emotions effectively and productively. It is becoming increasing clear that these skills are one of the primary foundations of better performance and adjustment to the society. So, now if you are a teacher, you are a parent or a student yourself, you all know and experience that emotional intelligence is highly important in a teen's development. There is considerable evidence that pointing to its positive role is helping students deal with stress, developing relationship, and handle transitions and facing them. So, uh, please just off your chat box. We have some questions like pre-webinar questions here. So it's all about, if we are talking about what is emotional intelligence, or we are talking about how emotional intelligence works with teenagers, so it is important to know your emotions also. So we have a couple of questions here. Can we start polling? Please off your chat box so that you can answer it. So our first question is, everyone is here in some of the guest of honors are having a beautiful morning ahead, and our participants have a good evening right now. So how are you feeling today? You can just click on the answer. The polling will end in 30 seconds. You can take your time and answer it carefully, or how are you feeling? Be comfortable.
Some people are putting it into the chat. That's fine too. Got some good feelings going.
So 34% people are feeling amazing. That's really good. You are starting with an emotional intelligence thing and you are feeling amazing. That's really helped you a lot. So, and 65.6% are feeling good. It's good actually, according to our whole webinar. So always feel amazing, always feel good. It will help you to acquire many things in your life. And can we have our second questions? Like, if we talk about emotional intelligence, what we think emotional intelligence is, and do you think emotional intelligence plays an important role in our lives?
One of the most relevant subjects on the planet.
Exactly. But many of us still confuse our emotion about our emotions. Like, are we angry, or we are in guilt, or we are sad or happy, or we are feeling amazing? It's important to have a emotional intelligence.
But I guess many people are not aware of what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah,
People
exactly.
are about intelligent quotient and things. People are not aware of what exactly emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is.
Exactly. But here our participants had 100% yes. They polled 100% yes, that emotional intelligence plays an important role in our life. So it's really very good that we all know that emotional intelligence has a huge part in our life. And we have our last pre-webinar question, like it's all about teenager. So we have our question like how to manage, what's your opinion about managing teenager emotional balance? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Or you're not sure or you're confused? Like to handle teenagers emotional balance is really very confusing. So what's your opinion about that?
Let me just say that if you don't know too much about emotional intelligence, by the end of this session, you will.
Exactly.
Is it I who got?
So we have our results, like 13.6% has says it's easy. It's easy to manage a teenager's emotional balance. Then if you are a parent, then you have a good parenting, I can say that. And 81.8% has says it's difficult. Really, I also feel that it's difficult. And 4.5% are not sure. So if you are not sure, if you are confusing or you think it's difficult or you think it's easy, you will all get to know in this webinar. So with these words, I would like to start this webinar, emerging understanding of emotional intelligence among teenagers. So I request our chief guest of the evening, Dr. M.A. Khalid sir, to come over here and speak some few words. I would like to introduce Dr. Khalid sir. He is a senior clinical psychologist of Bangladesh, has 38 years of experience on the table, currently working as senior faculty of MBA and EMBA program in reputed University of Bangladesh. I would like to request him to come over and forward the addressing note. Over to you, sir. Hello, Khalid, sir.
Muted.
Khalid, sir.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening here in Bangladesh. I'd like to convey my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Matt Palestine, Chief Executive Officer, UQ Peace Worldwide Incorporated, USA. Dr. Barbara Fatum, school psychologist, college professor, and master trainer in emotional intelligence, USA. Mr. Ray Mathis, mental health professor, Chicago University Institute of REBT, USA, and author of Mental and Emotional Toolkit for Life. Mr. Subbu Paramaneswaran, co-founder and CEO, Learning Curve Foundation, India. Dr. Dimpy Mahanto, founding head and faculty, Department of Psychology, Cotton University, Assam. Mr. Swamitra Basu, psychological counselor and dance movement therapy practitioner, India. It is necessary to mention here that Ms. Nandini De, program coordinator and counseling psychologist, who has been working hard to make this session as great success. Thanks to Nandini De. I'd like to share a few outlines of today's topic on emerging understanding of emotional intelligence of teenagers. Actually, we have to teach teens in terms of emotional intelligence. Actually, emotional intelligence is not often discussed among families or classrooms. It's kind of conversation we might have with a therapist or health instructor. In reality, what we understand emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is one's ability to do like, recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, understand how others might feel and why, manage emotional reactions, choose a different mood or feeling. A person with emotional intelligence has a good handle on their emotions. In fact, they are so good with managing emotions that they are okay with the strong feelings of others as well. Emotional intelligence leads a person to develop a variety of skills. Let's discuss why teens might lack emotional intelligence. Typically, teens are still developing parts of brain that might inhibit their ability to be aware. For the most part, because teens lack a fully developed prefrontal cortex, they can be emotional and impulsive and lack some degree of emotional intelligence. Let's see the benefit to growing more emotionally intelligent. Better relationship, healthier responses to life, feeling of confidence, being resilient, ability to be self-aware, being empathetic, ability to regulate emotions, having improved social skills, better decision making, less impulsivity, being assertive, ability to be happier more often, ability to problem solve. Nandini, can you hear me? Is okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. This is
It's
especially
audible, sir.
true. This is especially true if a teen is having a challenging time with their peers or with family relationship. Supporting them in becoming more emotionally intelligent can bring about many benefits they can carry into adulthood. Now I'll discuss the way to teach teens emotional intelligence. Number one, talk about emotional intelligence. Perhaps the best way to start is to let your teen know about emotional intelligence and to discuss what it means. Practice emotional intelligence at home, become emotionally intelligent take practice. Now, now I'll discuss how parents can also play a vital role to help their teens with this by asking teens. Hello, hello, please stop talking. Please stop talking. Nandini, mute করে দাও, just mute. How parents can also play a vital role to help their teens with this by asking teens, how do you feel about that? What was your first reaction? What fears or anxieties are getting in your way? What are you excited by? How did that make you feel? In other words, you can allow the discussion of feelings into your conversation, like model emotional intelligence. Your teen can learn to bring emotional intelligence into their own life when they see it first in yours. Attend workshop or training together. You and your teen will able to find an event to attend that focus on how to become more emotionally intelligent. A therapist or a school counselor can further support your teen's ability to be more emotionally aware. Take online quiz and find out just how emotionally intelligent. Teen can attend a support group focused on emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence does not happen overnight. It's not happening overnight. Although teen may be taking classes and practicing at home, need to talk about feelings, explore feelings, and become more accustomed to experiencing feelings. More importantly, they will need to find a way to be with feelings in a mature way. Parents might remember to give their teens the time they need to develop these skills necessary for a healthy adulthood. So thank you to all for giving me the opportunity to be this chairperson. As so, I think there are so many resource persons, senior professors, and scholars are with us. So I hand over to Nomini to give their thoughts. Hello, Nandini. Hello. Oh, anybody?
Yes, your voice is audible, sir.
So somebody, Nandini, where is Nandini? Hello?
Hmm.
We can't hear your voice, Nandini.
Hello?
Yep. Well, while she's working on that, she was just going to introduce me next. So
Okay.
we'll skip that for
Okay.
now.
Oh,
She'll come
let
back.
me introduce. No. Let me introduce you. I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. You are you're a friend of mine since long. So, Mr. Matt Palestine is now the CEO EQ4 Peace Worldwide Incorporated USA.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then introduce. Audible now.
Sorry,
Introduce.
it's kind of technical error here.
No problem. Go ahead
Okay.
for introduce Matt now. I finished my chapter. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for such a kind words, and I am feeling that we will learn a lot about intelligence quotient or emotional intelligence in this webinar. So I would like to welcome our honorable keynote speaker, Mr. Matt Perlstein. Mr. Matt is also known as EQ Dude, as he has been immersed in teaching, studying, writing about, and practicing emotional intelligence for over 30 years in USA. He also runs as a non-profit organization in USA known as EQ for Peace. He believes we can change the world from inside out with emotional intelligence by teaching how to manage our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. I welcome you today in this webinar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So if you know a little about emotional intelligence, you know, or you wouldn't be here. I was getting ready to do a fancy PowerPoint to explain emotional intelligence. There's so much to it. I'd be happy to share it with you if you like afterward. But more importantly, I think I'd like to use this as time as a maybe a little more of a working session, if you will, because there's some great people on this call and there's some brilliant minds and a lot of experience. And then some not so experienced, but you have experience with people and with teens and with life. So what I would like is for this to be more interactive. Some of these presenters have amazing amount of information. Ray's going to be ask you to sit back and listen to him and go through as he goes through the PowerPoint, and so you can just kind of let it sink in. But what I would like is if you would sit forward a little bit and let us work. Let's see if we can find out some solutions perhaps on how to go from here, because things are not going well, as I'm sure you know. So here's a poll. How do you feel about the future? How hopeful do you feel about the future? Go ahead and hit that number and begin and go in.
Now is 10, I assume, means very hopeful?
Yes, thank you. 1 is dismal and 10 is very hopeful and you think everything's going to be fine. I would like to give you some statistics to let you know how bad things are. Actually, there's some good. Oh, I'm surprised. Good for you guys. We're feeling fairly hopeful. I put a 7 for myself personally. I do feel like we will be able to make some difference with emotional intelligence, and that things are going to be okay. And in the meantime, things are not okay. They're really not. And I don't want to bring a downer into this thing, but people don't know how they feel. They don't know emotional intelligence. They don't know the difference between their thoughts and their feelings. They don't know that they get to choose, that they can integrate, they can change their thoughts. They don't know that they have the ability to manage their inner world. Most of the people I've worked with are either completely clueless, they don't understand what's going on, or they're actually afraid of their own feelings. They're afraid of their own self. I've had that feeling when I was a teenager. It was pretty painful. I didn't go through a lot of the traumas that some people do, but it was because I didn't know my emotions at all. It was extremely painful for me. And it's one of the things that has driven me to make sure that we tell people now is how to do this. I think this, with all this lockdown now, it's even harder for teens than adults in some ways, because they're going through so many transitions and all the things that are going on inside of them. Dr. Fadum, Barbara's going to go through some of the science of how this works, and you understand what's going on in these kids. And it's hard enough as it is, and now things are much, much harder and much, much scarier. There's a CDC study recently, the Center for Disease Control. 40% of the people found that they had one mental or emotional health condition. 40%. 31% experienced symptoms of anxiety and depression. 31. That's almost a third of the people. 26% had trauma. There's things called ACE studies. You may have heard of them. Adverse childhood experiences. There's so many people that have trauma in their life and they do not know how to deal with it. 13% recently have started or increased substance abuse. Addictions are a real problem. Domestic violence is going up. Sexual assault or childhood abuse is going up. Divorce is going up. And suicide is like skyrocketing right now. 11% of the people seriously considered suicide. 11% in the last 30 days in the US. These are US numbers, but still, the number two form of death in the United States for 10 to 24-year-olds is suicide now. The number two cause of death. That's awful. Can we do something about that? Can emotional intelligence help people get through this? What do you guys think?
Well, for sure. Dr. Ellis used to always have, one of his famous quotes is, therapy should be educational and education can be very therapeutic. Well, I really believe in the latter part. And if we can educate people, it's really more simple than people realize. It's just, we spend so much time teaching kids about so much about life and how it works and how to use that knowledge to their advantage. And yet we teach them very little about what goes on inside their own head and how to manage that better and to apply or use that to their advantage in their life. And that's, people have to be in the right mental and emotional place to do the things they want to do in life. And too many simply aren't there and don't know how to get there.
Very much agree with that. Very much agree. I think it's actually unfair to people, to kids, that they don't know, that we don't teach them. That's why we're here. Maybe we can help teach you guys and you can spread this on. Our generation doesn't know either. We're just finding out how to do emotional intelligence. We're kind of learning together.
Can I share one little quick story, Matt?
Sure, Ray.
I was almost 40 years old, probably about 37, and I was having a bad day at school, and this is part of my PowerPoint, and I was talking to a counselor friend, and he said, wait, look, Ray, it's your choice how you want to feel. And I was like, what? What do you mean it's my choice how I want to feel? And then he explained it to me, and it changed my life forever. And the sad part is I was a psychology major in the undergraduate program I went through. And no one had ever told me that it was my choice how I wanted to feel. So I went through almost 40 years of my life thinking that I was at the mercy of what happened and other people's comments and actions. And it just amazed me that it took that long for me to find that out. We should be telling kids that from very early in their life.
Absolutely. Sabu? Emotional
Matt, sorry, did you have a question for me?
Say it again.
Sorry, did you have a question for me?
Just that you have such a great perspective on this. Have you been doing it so long? Do you think we can actually make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no doubt in my mind that we can make the difference, and I think we need to make that difference. We simply cannot afford to fail a generation of children and young adults ahead of us. In my mind, it's very simple. I think if there's one thing that we need to be able to give the future generation, that is the gift of whether we call it social emotional
Absolutely. Um, so put in the chat, if you would, what do you think? What do you think is the best way that we can move forward? Dr. Maher said, it's our social responsibility to educate emotional intelligence as a subject. I completely agree with that. Thank you for sharing that. We have things to fight against. We have I was looking up and I found that, there's movies, entertainment, all in the entertainment industry, there's movies, reading, etc. You know, what's the number one form of entertainment now? By far, video games, number one, by far, form of entertainment. You know what's the number one video game in the world? It's called Grand Theft Auto. It is absolutely gruesome. It's horrible. So that's what kids are doing. A lot of kids are doing, and they're learning actually the opposite of what we're trying to teach. So we have to be loud, we have to be big, and we need to educate. The trick we have with education is it's a little bit slow. This is not a quick fix. So we need to get started, but what else can we do? What else can we do? And how do we do it? One of the other things I think we can do is to educate on peace. Our nonprofit is called EQ for Peace worldwide. And it's about, we can teach inner peace, just me, inside of me, interpersonal peace, me and you getting along, social peace, all of us getting along together as a team, as a family, as a work group. And then hopefully someday, as people learn all of that, then they can take that and create global peace. We'll see.
Matt, can I say one of the metaphors I like to use is a football metaphor. When you go into a football game, you always want to have an offensive and defensive game plan. And a lot of times what programs do is they have an offensive game plan where they say, here's what you should think, here's how you should do things. And what we need also is a defensive game plan. We need to identify what the opposition is. What goes wrong inside people's heads? How do things go awry in their head? And then develop a defensive game plan against that. That's why I've always liked rational emotive behavioral therapy, because it helps people identify how things go wrong in their head and teaches them a defensive game plan against that, in addition to providing helpful advice and information.
That defensive game plan is a fantastic idea. I like that concept. And with kids locked down and having to separate, belonging is one of the strongest things that we feel as humans, and it's very difficult to get a feeling of belonging when you're sitting in a room by yourself all day, every day. Very difficult. It makes it even harder. It's hard enough as a teenager to do that, or as an adult, and to do it sitting by yourself is even harder. So we have quite a challenge ahead. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want this to be a downer. I want us to be able to come together with some solutions. You're going to learn some great stuff from the presenters as we carry on. Please keep using the chat and let us know what you're thinking and feeling about this. Let us know what you're wanting to take away, some aha moments or some interesting information that you want to take with you that we can use, that we can give to kids. We're in this all together. We've never done this before. None of us have ever done this before. And so let's make it happen. Let's do it as a team and see what we can do to change the world from the inside out. So I'll end there. Please stay involved, and we'll move on to our next presenter. Enjoy. Nandini, you're on. Someone just asked if anger management is part of emotional intelligence. Absolutely. One of the biggest parts. One of the most, I think anger is the most misunderstood feeling we have. It is also the most destructive feeling we have, but it can also be the most motivational and most healing feeling that we have if we understand it and we do it right. And almost nobody knows how to do it or handle it correctly. We don't even talk about it. We don't learn about it in schools. And so how are you supposed to deal with our anger? Most people do not know.
Can I say one thing about anger management?
Sure.
I really want us to think about anger prevention, because anger is kind of like, I always think of the Incredible Hulk. Once he hulks out, it's smash time. Anger is like emotional nitroglycerin, and it's always better to try to prevent. There's an old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's always easier to prevent anger than it is to try to channel it into some healthy way once it's there. It's just too explosive. It's designed to be that way. It's part of our fight or flight. It's designed to help us deal with some major threat to our life. The problem is that people create and manufacture threats where they don't exist, or magnify ones that do out of proportion to reality. So what we got to try to do is teach them how not to do that, so that they prevent anger in the first place. Because once it's there, it's really hard to get somebody, because anger gives people a false sense of power, righteousness, permission, and protection. And once they get that, it's very hard to deal with them.
Good point. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Matt and Mr. Ray, about all these things we have discussed here. And I know it's really important to understand your emotion and make teenagers to understand how emotion works for them. So I would like to introduce now Dr. Barbara Fatum. She is a school psychologist in Canada College. And if I introduce Dr. Barbara Fatum, I want to say about her some words, that she began the program of personal learning plans for each student. And in fact, allowing them for different education. Narrative evaluation was created for each student, and everything she has done for the sake of emotional intelligence in her college. So I request Dr. Barbara Fatum to join over here and give us some wonderful tips to how to manage emotion in teenagers. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nandini. Good morning, everyone. It is now 7 a.m. in where I am, California, in the United States. So you probably have watched my background go from pretty dark to a little bit lighter. Unfortunately, we have many fires burning in California, and the air outside is very smoky. There were some severe thunder and lightning storms a couple of weeks ago, and most of the fires have come from lightning strikes. So not only are we experiencing lockdown, but we also are experiencing many things that are out of our control in terms of the environment and what's happening around us. So there never has been a better time for learning about emotional intelligence. I just want to correct one thing and just say it out loud so that it's clear. My college is not Canada College. I couldn't put the little umlaut over the N. It's Cañada. And Cañada means valley in Spanish. So where I am in California, Cañada College is in a very beautiful valley. And I have been a professor there for a long time. I have taught for more than 30 years, and I also have been a school psychologist. I'm a practitioner. And my dissertation topic was emotional intelligence and academic achievement in elementary school children. Our elementary programs are K through 8. So the beginning of adolescence was really there with the children that I studied. Since then, I have written a book, and I have continued to work with children K through 12 in various areas in the United States. I've also lived internationally and worked in international schools, so have a global perspective on the differences really in our cultures and how we view things. My topic this morning is taking care of the adolescent brain. As Matt said, the teenage time is a very special period of time. And Nandini, can you put the PowerPoint up? Did you receive
Yeah,
it?
sure, ma'am. I'm putting your PowerPoint. Just give me one
Thank
second.
you.
Yeah, just
Thank
give
you.
me. Here is your PPT, ma'am.
Okay. Taking care of the adolescent brain. As I said, the teenage time is a very special time. And interestingly enough, it's only in recent years with the research that we have been able to do with magnetic imaging and other functional magnetic imaging and other ways of studying the brain and actually seeing what's going on in the brain that we really have begun to understand adolescence. So this morning, I just want to take a very short period of time to talk about the developing teenage brain. So as you all probably know, the human brain changes in size, structure, and ability throughout childhood and adolescence. Scientists tell us that the cerebral cortex is not fully developed until adulthood. That is approximately age 25. Once we learned that information, we realized that has big implications for adolescence. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go along this morning. Human beings are born with approximately 100 billion neurons. We can't even begin to conceive of what that number is, 100 billion neurons. And those neurons are capable of simple functions. As we get older, the neurons get longer, bigger, and wider until they reach full size. The important thing to know about these neurons is that when children are little, the neurons are only capable of simple actions and interactions. As they grow, the neurons become more capable of complex interaction. Nandini, can we play this video?
Sure, ma'am. You can play this video. I'm playing that video right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would like us to share a video, very simple video, how the brain works. Okay, I was afraid of that. It may not work because I
wait, I'm sharing it. First of all, I will put down this PPT. Then I will share that video. Just give me 1 second. Yeah.
Thank you, Nandini.
Not audible. Is there
Nandini, let's not do
audible? Ma'am, not audible.
Not the correct one. Let's not do it.
Okay. Wait, it's not audible?
It also isn't the correct video, so let's not do it.
Okay. Let's skip that one. I'm showing the PPT right now. Is it okay, ma'am?
Okay. Now we need the PowerPoint back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about the process of myelination. Although those neurons that I just talked about may grow to completely adult size, initially, they are not what we call myelinated. And myelinated is the process of coating the axons to protect the electrical signals of the neurons and make their transmission smooth. Think of wearing earbuds and listening to something on your phone or another form of music and having that interrupted. Or look at what's happening to us here on the screen as we try to transmit information internationally. It often is interrupted, and that makes it difficult for us to understand what is being said or what we want to talk about or learn about. Myelination is the process of allowing the communication between neurons to work smoothly. And as I said in the first slide, the process of myelination is not complete until we reach age 25. You need all the information from your neurons in order to know what is going on, in order to act correctly, and to make good decisions. If you think about it, teens, without this process of myelination complete, might find their decision-making information incomplete, have difficulty managing their impulses, and also have difficulty making decisions. To talk briefly about puberty, during puberty, which all adolescents are going through, hormones rule. Hormones are chemicals that are released into the teen's blood, which travel around and change each body from its childhood form into its adult form. Scientists tell us that during this process, the hypothalamus produces kisspeptin, which then stimulates the growth hormone, GnRH for everybody, estrogen for females, and testosterone for males. Uh-oh.
Hello, ma'am. Is there any
Yes,
problem?
that was a very good example of an interrupted transmission.
Oh.
Zoom just cut me off. I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. Hormones in shaping the body and in shaping the brain transforms not only our physical selves, but also our emotional and cognitive selves. One thing that happens during adolescence is that the intensity of feeling often increases. Hormones seem to turn up the volume of our emotions during adolescence. Also, another thing that scientists tell us is that there is something called the spotlight effect, which teenagers, adolescents experience. Think of a spotlight shining down from a theater proscenium. Now, shine that spotlight on yourself. This is the spotlight effect. And teens, as a result of the changing hormones in their bodies, often feel like there's a spotlight on them and that everyone is talking about them and watching them. This results many times in teens needing to take a break from social interactions, needing to perhaps go out into nature or into their room and be by themselves. There's a lot going on for teenagers, and this gives them time to process it and to rejuvenate so that they can then enter again into social interactions. Another interesting fact that we know is that painful emotions, which teens experience a lot, light the same pain centers in the brain as physical emotions. So one thing that's important for adults to know is that our adolescents actually experience the same feelings with emotional pain that they do with physical pain. Painful emotions light the pain centers in the brain. So think of the intensity of feelings, the spotlight effect, the effect of painful emotions, and you have an idea of some of the chaos of adolescence. How can we help? Well, adults can help teens by teaching them to pursue important passions like music, sports, writing, drama, drawing, painting. These passions, which teens often involve themselves in with intensity, calm the intensity of the emotions that teens are feeling and provide stability in what often seems to them like a chaotic world. In terms of experiencing emotion, it is the right temporal parietal junction, which is right here behind your, above and slightly behind your right ear, that scientists have shown is critical to developing empathy. Empathy can be very difficult to understand. I'm not going to ask Nandini to play this video because I don't think it will.
Okay, I will share this link in chat box. That will be
in
fine.
the chat. I see it. Yes, so you can watch it later.
Yeah.
This is Brene Brown's very simple video on the difference between empathy and sympathy. When you have a chance, please watch it. It is both informative and funny, and it gives us a very good idea of exactly what empathy is. Empathy, Brene Brown teaches us in this video, fuels connection. And one of the things that the teenage brain needs is that feeling of connection, that feeling of belonging, that feeling of being valued. Empathy helps our teenagers with perspective taking. Perspective taking is seeing that the others have a truth. Now, that truth may be different from our truth, but being able to listen and understand that truth and forming perspective taking is important. Secondly, empathy is non-judgmental. Our brains love patterns. Our brains love to recognize something and put it in a category or a pattern. We judge when we make patterns. Things are good or bad. Things are good for us or bad for us. Things are like ourselves or not like ourselves. One of the things that we need to teach teens to do is to be non-judgmental. I'm back on the importance of experiencing emotions. Sorry. Empathy also helps teens to recognize others' emotions. A very important part of developing the skills that we need for the intimate relationships that will come in later adolescence and adulthood. And finally, empathy allows us to communicate that we do understand. Brene Brown says in this video, it often is most important to say to someone else who is experiencing something difficult, I really don't know what to say right now, but I am very glad that you told me about it. That allows the other person to feel connected, to feel that they have been understood. And often out of that, the process of problem solving can begin. Scientists tell us that it is very important for teenagers to develop empathy and to connect emotional experience with the thinking part of their brain. Think about the difference between a donation box, which is set up in your school or your business, asking for people to bring canned goods to put in a box, which will then be distributed to people in need, versus working in a soup kitchen where people actually come in. You meet the people, you interact with them, you talk to them as you're serving them the food that they need. Which one will develop a stronger sense of empathy for our teenagers and for people who are engaging in that activity? We want, as much as possible, to give our adolescents experiences that build empathy. Another thing that is difficult during the teenage years is making mistakes and struggling. Next slide, Nandini. Why do scientists say that struggling makes you stronger? Making mistakes strengthens the function and the coordination of the prefrontal cortex, the cerebral cortex, which is our highest area of thinking, and the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is the band of fibers that goes down the center of our brain and coordinates the activities of the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Making mistakes allows the brain hemispheres to work together. It allows us to learn more complex skills because we build that strong bridge between the hemispheres and the prefrontal cortex. Struggle makes you think, figure out what to do next, fail, and try again. Giving the important parts of your brain a good workout builds our sense of competence, confidence, and gives us the ability as adolescents to look at that sort of chaotic world that we feel and deal with it. The next thing is the role of practice. Scientists tell us, next slide, Nandini. Scientists tell us that during the teenage years, the brain prunes pathways that don't get used. Those that are practiced become hardwired into the structure and function of our brain. Scientists say neurons that fire together wire together. So the more we practice something, the stronger the neural pathways we are creating, and the smoother the transmission is of those ideas, behaviors, and feelings. One thing that can be very helpful during the teenage years is something that we call growth mindset. And Dr. Carol Dweck of Stanford University has created this idea through the notion of neural plasticity. Our brains constantly change, and every activity that we engage in changes our brains. During the teenage years, many of those activities are a struggle. Many of those activities are difficult to understand. Carol Dweck's idea of growth mindset has to do with adding yet to this idea of practice. So supposing an adolescent is struggling with a math problem. I can't do this, I'm stupid, this is awful, I will never get this, is a fixed mindset. And as you can tell from the tone of my voice, doesn't help the adolescent solve the problem. Simply adding the word yet, I can't do this yet, changes that whole mindset and allows the adolescent to continue the struggle and to eventually feel the confidence that comes from solving the problem. The last thing I want to talk about is the importance of sleep. Next slide, please, Nandini. Scientists tell us about the jet lag of puberty. Melatonin makes us drowsy. During adolescence, melatonin is released later in the evening. This gives teens difficulty falling asleep. Compound this with the idea that scientists tell us that teenagers need as much as 9 hours of sleep to allow their brains to change, grow, and re-energize. So not only do teens need that alone time, that sense of belonging to a group, but they need 9 hours of sleep. All of these things help to allow their brains to grow, change, and re-energize. Denise Clark Pope of Stanford University here in California works with many middle and high schools to make the needs of teens understood. Block scheduling, later starting times, other kinds of assessment rather than just standardized tests are concepts that her research has shown need to be discussed as part of the school system. Next slide, please, Nandini. So I'm going to end my talk simply with takeaways. What have I said this morning? First of all, it is important that we know about the developing brain, process of myelination, and how important it is to protect that developing brain. The longer axons in our body, the ones that reach from our brain to our toes, can actually break without proper myelination. And so we need to understand that brain needs protection. Secondly, we talked about emotional intensity, the importance of emotions, and the importance of developing empathy for future interactions. All of those are things that we need to guide our teams through and help them follow their passions, balance what they sometimes see as the chaos of adolescence. We talked about mistakes and struggle and the importance of the prefrontal cortex and the corpus callosum working together to help all the parts of the brain communicate well. We talked about practice and pruning. Those things that are practiced during adolescence are the things that become hardwired. Those things that are not practiced, our brain prunes away and they become much more difficult to perform. We talked about pursuing passions and how pursuing passions help bring stability to this time of adolescence. We talked about what teens feel like, the drama, the intense emotions, the spotlight effect. We talked about teens needing 9 hours of sleep a night. Most of our teens do not get anywhere near that with the way that we schedule them. The message from scientists is that we need to help teens protect their developing brains, help them to understand all of these very important concepts so that they can begin to make sense out of the world, which for many of them is quite chaotic. Thank you so much. There was a final slide. I don't think you have it, Nandini, in this version. I'll put my information in chat in case, oh, there it is. Okay, yay. All right, in case you want to continue the conversation, there's my website, my email, and my phone number. Thank you all for listening this morning.
Ma'am, you have a couple of questions. We have a couple of questions here from many of the participants. It's like one question is from Dulmoni Das, that how can we assess EI among teens? Hello.
So one of the things that we are doing with EQ for Peace is we are trying to address how to bring emotional intelligence to students during this time of COVID-19. So we are creating online lessons, which will very shortly be on my website, and then shortly after that, be uploaded onto EQ for Peace. These are free. As I said, I have taught more than 30 years. My office, which you can see behind me, is full of information that's just sitting here. And we don't want it just sitting here. We want to get it out in the world. So very shortly, and Nandini, I will let you know when they are available. The first 6 lessons will be available on my website. And then shortly after that, they will also be uploaded onto EQ for Peace. So I hope that that's helpful to everyone. They are free, and we want them out there in the world and people to be able to work with them.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There is some other questions in chat box. Due to time constraint, we can't ask it right now. So it is requested to you to please answer all those questions from our participants. It will be good if you can share your knowledge and make us aware about how we use the emotional intelligence among teens. It is really very interesting that how you discuss about the brain part and everything. Like in the teenagers are most vulnerable stage of life. Actually, they have so many confusing about hormones, activities, and social. There is so much conflict with nature versus nurture that we call actually. So it's all about their confusion. So it will be great if you can put it in chat box, some grateful tips about how to manage them and how to make them understand that yes, emotion is necessary. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to introduce Mr. Subbu Parmeshwaram, co-founder and CEO, Learning Curve Foundation. He co-founded Learning Curve Foundation in 2016 to address a key missing element in the education system today, that is social emotional intelligence learning. So I would like to request Mr. Subbu Parmeshwaram to come over and give us some wonderful knowledge about emotional intelligence. Over to you, sir.
I think you're muted, Subbu.
Hi, everyone. Good morning to those from the US. Good evening to those from the other part of the world. I'm just going to see is the screen visible though?
Yes.
Yes, screen is visible. You can continue.
It doesn't seem to be moving though.
No, screen is visible.
Well, just a second.
Let's start
So
over.
anyway, I mean, while I'm still trying to sort of set up. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm not a scientist, or I'm not a researcher or an academic. I'm just a regular guy who, after a lot of work in the corporate and consulting world, stumbled onto something that felt extremely important for the education system, for the children, for the young adults, and that happens to be what we call social emotional learning, what is also known as emotional intelligence, etc. So, and thank you, Matt, for considering sort of me worthy of being here today. Thanks for that. And I just want to take a few minutes, right? And I just want to take a few minutes and really come at it. Yes, Barbara's really talked about the science of it. I think that's been awesome. And I just want to maybe simplify that for myself and the folks a little bit, and just talk about very few basic things that might be of interest. And I can see that. Just give me 1 sec, just to make sure the slide moves.
It's not.
So that's the other thing. No. I'm just trying to share this, Matt. That's the other thing about technology. It never works when you want it to. Okay, is this visible to everybody? Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
Yes, this is visible.
All right. So what are we going to talk about today? I think just 3 very simple things. I'm going to take a little peek inside the teenage brain. And Barbara's already talked about most of that, so I'll keep it short. But I want to maybe focus a little bit about what are their needs. And once we understand their needs is when we can then figure out what to teach them and how. So I think those are the 3 perspectives that I'd like to be able to talk about today. A very quick sort of brief about Learning Curve and the work we do. We're a non-profit organization in India, and the mission is very simple and also very complex at the same time. It's to transform education through social emotional learning. And the idea is essentially that social emotional learning, emotional intelligence, EQ absolutely must become a part of mainstream education practice. And that's really what we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been fortunate enough to work with around 200 schools and about 45,000 students in the last 4 years or so, and about 20,000 parents as well. So it's been a little bit of an interesting, I think, journey. I think we've been not only have we discovered a lot about what social emotional learning might be, but we've actually discovered a lot about ourselves as well as part of this. So that's a little bit about who we are. And here's Rajesh, right? 9 years old. He loves school. He loves to go to school. He loves to. He's got favorite subjects. He's got friends. He loves to play, and is generally a very happy child. And I'm sure we all know children like this, right? And if you do, you can sort of keep interacting in the chat box. And 4 years later, this is what happens when Rajesh becomes 13, or what we call as the terrible teens, right? So gets angry often, stays up all night, but sleeps all day, and that comes back in a way to what Barbara talked about, that the melatonin release happens much later during the day, and they find it very difficult to sleep. So he stays up all night, sleeps all day, and almost feels like there's a wall around this young chap, right? Very difficult to get through, very difficult to talk to. It almost feels like they're not listening. Can we relate to this? Can we sort of relate to this for either parents of teenagers or teachers who teach classes that have adolescents? Responses in the chat box are welcome, of course. But I think we can all relate to it, right? I think we've all seen this happen. Some of us are probably even experiencing this. So what's really happening then? What do we think is really happening? One is that there is a lot of science, there's a lot of evidence, and again, Barbara talked about it, that the development of the brain keeps happening until adulthood, which is 25 years. And there is evidence. In fact, the adolescent brain has been one of the least studied brains. It's only in the last, probably about the last couple of decades, that there's been a lot more of work that's happened in that space. But it's said and it's seen that the one of the biggest growth spurts that happens in the brain happens at that teenage age group, at that adolescent age, and between early childhood and this is the biggest growth spurt that happens. So there's a tremendous amount of brain development, brain growth that's actually happening at that time. And if you add to that the process of how myelination happens, right? And Barbara talked about that the connections are not smooth enough, the connections are still forming, right? Imagine a Ferrari, right? It's a very powerful car, a very powerful engine. Now imagine this Ferrari is on steroids. It's all revved up, it's all pumped up, it's ready to go, but doesn't know where to go. Right? The driver is not in the right frame of mind. So imagine a Ferrari on steroids, and a teenager is much like that, right? Teenagers have huge amount of potential to accomplish, but then their brain circuitry is still work in progress, and the brain circuitry is still immature, and therefore you see things like they're not able to make those right kind of choices, they're not able to make those right kind of decisions. So you have all of that power and not really knowing what to do with it, right? The third thing I think, which is very important that we see, is that there is a search for identity, right? I need to know, I'm trying to figure out who I am, I'm trying to figure out what I'm like, and I'm doing this in an environment where I have multiple different influences. I've got my teachers, I've got my parents, I've got my peers, I've got social media, I've got games, I've got this whole host of influences on my life right now, and I'm trying to figure out who I am in the middle of all of this. So as you can imagine, what's going on inside the brain is this significant daily tug of war, daily conflict that's actually happening inside the brain, and it's a mix of biology and behavior that this particular adolescent, this teenager, is trying to figure out. And I hope we can all sort of relate to that. So I have a question for everyone, and I'd like a couple of people to sort of pitch in. And we were all teenagers once, right? So here's a question for the group, and maybe I'll take maybe one or two quick sort of responses, or in the chat box. Unfortunately, I'm not able to see the chat box, so I don't know what you guys are saying. But let me ask you this question, right?
Subbu sir, I will tell you if you want responses, I can tell you the responses.
Sure.
Go on.
Or maybe a couple of people can just unmute and talk. I'm good for that. So that might be a good way to sort of talk as well. So let me have the
Sure.
question is really this, right? Can you recall one thing that you did as a teenager that now it doesn't make sense to you? Is there one thing that anybody wants to recall maybe? Rewind a little bit into our own sort of adolescent life, and one thing that you did as a teenager doesn't make sense now as you think about it now. I'm happy for anybody to shout out a response if they want, because I can't see what's happening in the chat.
Shiva, this is Barbara. One thing, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
you're
Barbara,
audible.
please.
Okay, all right. One thing that I recall that I did as a teenager was change friendships many times. And each time I left a friend and joined a different group, I felt an enormous amount of sadness and anxiety as I left one group and joined another. There was a lot of toing and froing and not a lot of stability in friendships when I was a teenager.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. Anybody else? I have a few familiar faces in the group. I know that there are some teachers who've joined us from some of our schools. Is anyone there? Anyone who'd like to maybe respond?
You can unmute yourself one by one, and one can ask question from Mr. Subbu.
Yeah, no, respond to my question.
I want to say something.
So respond to my question, please.
Sir, in reference to your question, I want to say that I have my younger brother who is like 17 years of age, and what he is always doing is blaming parents that you are my enemy. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to share anything, and he's always alone every time.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. But I want you to recall one thing that you did as a teenager that doesn't make sense to you now. Let's talk about ourselves. Can you remember something from when you were 13?
Copy film stars.
Sorry?
Copying the activities of or dressing of film stars.
Okay. Yeah, I can relate to a bit of that. Yes.
And this is Swaha. So what I can relate to it was instant gratification. Suppose if I wanted this at that moment. I wouldn't wait for another hour or so.
Makes sense, yeah. And thinking back now, as you sort of look back at it, a lot of it doesn't make sense, right? And you would say, why would I have done something like that, or why would I have behaved like that, right? We can relate to that, right? Now, let me ask you another question, right? Can you also recall how an adult reacted to what you did? So imagine that you'd actually gone to, or if you'd actually gone to your parents and said something, or did something as a teenager. How did they react to what you did? What was their reaction? What was their response?
It's Barbara again. My mother was very good at listening. And each time I went through an upheaval, I could sit down and talk to her. And I credit those conversations with my mom as giving me a lot of the stability that I needed to get through that period of time.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And I think you were very fortunate, Barbara, to have a mother who understood the importance of listening and had that empathy sort of inbuilt, right? But are there others who might have had a slightly different experience?
Yes, this is Swaha again. Okay, this is Swaha again. Since I had this of instant gratification, what my parents used to do is they used to give me some other options like, okay, you want this? Why not think of something else that is equivalent to that? So that I had an option to choose, okay, whether I should go with my option or with what my parents gave in front of me. So I had to choose. It was not always that what I wanted. I again had to choose between my option and their option. So I had to toggle between those.
Very nice. So yes, I think, yeah. So, anybody else? One more. I'll take one more response on this.
Sir, whenever I did something unusual, so, and I go and told my father, so my father would like listen patiently first, and when I was like calm, then he'll tell me ki this is the mistake you did, and now this is what you have to do.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you for sharing. So I think a lot of us here are, I think, fortunate to have parents who demonstrated that level of understanding. But do you also think there's a world out there where adults don't necessarily understand this, and adults sorry, I'm getting a bit of background. Can we just please mute if you're not?
Yeah, sure. I'm muting the participant.
Thank you,
Wait a minute.
Nandini.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So while a lot of us have been fortunate enough to have that kind of a caring sort of adult, but would you also think that there is a world out there where adults don't necessarily understand?
So you are mute. Oh, okay. Hello, Mr. Subbu. Hello, sir. Hello.
Nandini, I'm losing the group.
No, no, no. You are here only. We can hear you.
We can still hear you, Sabu.
It's like
Oh.
his video is frozen though.
Yeah, I think he lost his connection.
Yeah, that's what I think happened. Because the picture that's on his screen is frozen.
He lost his connection, I think. So we will wait for a few minutes.
Yes, sure, Nandini.
Sorry, everyone, I'm back.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. You can continue.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a world out there where adults don't necessarily understand what a teenager is going through, and therefore the reactions to what teenagers do is not often understanding and listening, right? It's also a lot of misplaced anger. It's also a lot of advice that teenagers don't necessarily understand and relate to as well, right? So there is a mix of that, and that's something that a lot of us can sort of relate to, perhaps, right? So let's take a quick look at and sorry, but my PowerPoint has decided to hang. Just give me a second.
Sure.
Yes, Barbara, you're absolutely right. I think it's a great example. Okay, hopefully we can get through this without one more. But yeah, okay. But let's take a quick look at what sort of their needs are, right? I think and a teenager has this intense need to feel trusted. The need to feel that they can actually take responsibility for things, and the fact that they can actually handle things. So the need to feel trusted is very, very high. The second is the need to feel heard. I think certainly adults have this need to feel heard, but I think for teenagers that's probably 100x, right? And there is this constant conversation that's going on internally in their head, and they want to talk about it, they want to express it, but there is nobody who will listen to them. And it's not about just hearing what they have to say, but actually listening. And listening involves a lot of empathy there, right? And the third is a need to belong. It's a need to belong in their peer groups. It's a need to belong in other groups, right? And that is why they're constantly in search of a particular group, or constantly in search of a social identity, right? And if you look at it, and these are the three, at least from my perspective, or my opinion rather, is there are these three top needs of a teenager, right? And so what can we teach them? If you ask me, what can we teach them? I think one of the biggest gifts that we can give them is their ability to manage emotions. They are going through a veritable cocktail of emotions in their brain. They're experiencing parallel, simultaneous, conflicting and difficult emotions. So their ability, or our ability, to teach them how to manage these emotions, and this is really what emotional intelligence is all about. The ability to be aware of, the ability to recognize it, the ability to identify it, the ability to regulate it. And these are things that they need to learn how to do. They need to learn how to handle conflict. We need to teach them how to handle conflict within, conflict outside. Their ability to be able to work with other people, their ability to work with others in their peer environment, or even with adults, and being able to create those sort of solutions that both parties will sort of see as mutually beneficial. So handling conflict is one, and being able to make responsible sort of choices, and being able to make responsible decisions, right? This is something that they struggle with. This is something that they find it very, very difficult, and which is why you see a lot of those risky behaviors that happen, because they don't really understand the process. They haven't really got it yet. So if there are these three things that we can sort of teach them, then I think we would have sort of done our bit. But here's my next question. My question is, can you teach swimming through a textbook? I'm guessing the answer is no. I don't think there's a textbook where you can go and say, hey, you know what, dive like this, raise your right hand like this, raise your left leg like this. Does that even work? I can't teach anyone anything unless I've done it myself, unless I've actually practiced it myself, unless I've modeled it myself, right? And therefore, what we need to do in order to teach them is to be able to model it. And Dr. Khalid referred to this in the beginning, right? That as adults, if we're not able to model it, then I consider us incapable of being able to teach it. So what do we need to model? We need to model self-regulation. We need to model how we either not get angry at all, or understand that and be able to deal with it. We need to manage that. Because it is not good enough. It is not good enough for us to tell a teenager that, hey, you can't get angry at things like that, and the next moment you're doing the same thing. Because teenagers will look at you, and children learn by observation, children learn by imitation. And that's how it works. So we need to be able to model self-regulation in our lives first, to start with. We need to learn how to be empathetic before we teach them empathy. We need to learn how to be empathetic towards ourselves and towards others. Because if you're not doing that with ourselves, if you're not empathetic towards yourself, you can't be empathetic towards others, and then you can't teach it, right? Think of all the times when a teenager wants you to listen, and you've just put an empathy blocker in front of them, giving them a solution. They didn't want your solution. They wanted to be heard, right? They wanted somebody to listen to them. But we do that to ourselves. We do that to others. So we need to be able to model, practice, learn empathy for ourselves and others. And we need to learn flow behaviors. The default state that we have, or we are hardwired with, is basically the fight or flight. And that's our default state. That's what we are hardwired with. But if you'd imagine water flowing through a set of rocks, water finds a way to flow around, and the rocks and the water coexist, and both work with each other. But if we can't create those flow behaviors for ourselves, and while we are dealing with the world around us, I don't think we can actually teach the generation this. So these are three things that I felt were very important for us to be able to model. And if you're able to do that, then I think we would have some way forward in being able to manage and help these teenagers, help these adolescents craft an emotionally intelligent and a relevant and meaningful life for themselves. That's really all I had. I hope you enjoyed that. Happy to take reflections. And if we have time, we can take a couple of questions as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see the audience as well.
So if you want to ask question, please put it in chat box so that everyone can answer and everyone can see what are the knowledge is shared. So if we talk about teenagers, it is, as I told you all, that teenage is most confusing age. It's how strange the young should always think that the world is against them. Actually, they always think world is almost against them. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants anything. Nobody just, they don't have any communication. There is such a generation gap. They think about generation gap. So when in fact that it is the only time, it is only for them. They have to understand that this world is supporting them. This world is almost for them only. Thank you so much, Subbu sir, for such a nice session, and it helps us a lot. After this wonderful session, I would like to welcome Mr. Ray Matthews, mental health professor in Chicago Institute of REBT, USA, author of Mental and Emotional Toolkit for Life. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to try to share this screen here, see if this works. Okay. Okay, now I need to go to slideshow from the beginning. Okay, we're all set. Is that working?
Yeah, it's working and it's visible clearly.
Okay, and it's actually working. That's great. Okay, what I'd like, the title of my presentation today is called It's Your Choice How You Want to Feel. It's something someone said to me many, many years ago, and I realize now how much that changed my life forever. And that's why I think it's one of the most important things we need and can teach our young people. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. So I want to give you 4 resources you can refer to if you want to learn more about this, because I obviously don't have time to teach you everything I possibly could. One is a website called the Mental and Emotional Toolkit for Life, and the link address is itsjustanevent.com. Another one is mentalemotionalkarate.com. A third is Teacher ESP, which is effectiveness and stress prevention, but it's also for parents. Everything on there is relevant to parents. And the last one is the most recent book that I've published on Amazon called Look, It's Your Choice How You Want to Feel. Now, I was a health teacher, and part of my job was to try to get kids to not stop behaving in unhealthy ways and behave in healthier ways, and to try to help prevent them, if possible, from starting to engage in unhealthy behavior. Now, one of the things I realized very early was that passing out advice and information just was never going to do it. So what I realized from the very early on is that the real problem, most of my students, was that too many of them generated what I call a dysfunctional amount of emotion. And by that, I mean more than is helpful or necessary, more than they want to have, more than they know what to do with, and a type and amount that works against them. And I think just about every one of us has done that at some point in time. Now, to understand why that's important is if you make a list of all the behaviors that they engage in that are unhealthy and self-defeating, the issues and problems they struggle with so much, many are literally defined by generating a dysfunctional amount of emotion. For example, depression, anxiety disorder, anger problems. Others are caused or driven by it, like violence, fighting, arguing. And many of the behaviors they engage in are actually things they do to try to get relief from that emotion that they don't know what to do with, like smoking, drinking, using drugs, even dropping out of school or attempting suicide. And then there's all kinds of other problems that arise from those behaviors, like addiction, overdoses, and so forth. Now, another way to understand why this happens is a simple psychological principle that behavior starts and continues because it serves a purpose. And the purpose what gives purpose to many unhealthy self-defeating behaviors is that they generate more emotion and know what to do with. That's why, and as long as it continues to serve a purpose in their life, the advice and information I was passing out just didn't seem to help much. Now, one of the points I always try to make with teachers and parents and just about anybody, we all have to be in the right mental and emotional place to do a couple helpful things. One, access and act on advice and information we've been given. Learn from our own or others' experiences, to consider consequences before acting, and to function at the level you're capable of and want to. The real problem in education, for example, is that we have too many kids who just simply aren't in the right mental and emotional place. And we've never done enough to help them get there, and we still don't, even though we've started to move to social emotional learning. Now, one other thing I'd like to explain why dysfunctional amount of emotion is so crucial. It comes from Dr. Albert Ellis, who used to say, behavior tends to follow a person's emotions toward his or her life events. Basically, what it means is if you get depressed, you're going to act like a depressed person typically acts. If you get angry, you're going to act like angry people tend to act. Now, many years, so because of all these things I've talked about, I was always trying to find a way to help my kids or generate a more functional amount of emotion and to manage better what went on inside their own heads. And one day I had an unusually bad day of my own, and I went to a counselor of some of my students, and I was complaining to him about how these kids had acted. He listened for a long time. He did his Carl Rogers routine. And then after a while, he got a little impatient with me, and he said, look, Ray, it's your choice how you want to feel. And I didn't take that very well at first, but then he went on to explain to me Dr. Albert Ellis's ABC theory of emotions. And he also told me that in Chicagoland area where I live, there were actually classes offered for teacher in rational emotive behavioral therapy, or what's called REBT, or rational emotive behavioral education, called REBE. And I started taking those classes, and I knew the first night of the first class that I'd found what I've been looking for. Now, before I explain the ABC theory of emotions, though, I want to tell you about tool number 2, because I know from experience that sometimes when you tell people it's your choice how you want to feel, no one upsets you, you upset yourself, they don't always take it very well, and they often misinterpret what we're saying. So tool number 2 is unconditional self-acceptance, or USA, and unconditional other acceptance, or UOA. And what it basically means, it's what I call our default philosophical position. This is where we always start when I meet people and work with them. The first thing I tell them is that this is how I look at things. We choose to see anything that we and others think, feel, say, or do as part of being human and understandable given what our life experiences have been. And by understandable, I mean that if you put others through the same exact life experiences, they'd probably end up thinking, feeling, saying, and doing pretty much the same thing. Now, some people might fare better, others might fare worse, but most people would probably be somewhere in between. Now, so to get back to the ABC theory of emotion, most people walking the planet have what's called an external or outer locus of control. Now, a locus of control is where we see our feelings coming from, what we see as the cause of them. Now, what that means then, if they have an external locus of control, is they wrongly, and notice I underline wrongly, see what others say and do and what happens as the cause of how they feel. Now, if you were to create a formula for that, the way they look at things is the event equals my feelings. My events equal my feelings. Now, the problem with that is that puts them at the seeming, and notice I underline seeming mercy of what others think, feel, say, or do, and what happens. Now, it also implies or suggests that others must change what they think, feel, say, or do for the better, or things must get better for them to feel better. Well, my question about that is always, what if things never do get better? What if we never get rid of coronavirus? What happens then? Does that mean you're stuck feeling bad? Now, and usually what happens because people have an external locus of control is they typically leads to them feeling worse than they need to for much longer than they need to. Now, it also makes them feel like a victim, like they're at the mercy of other people, and it contributes to a sense of powerlessness. And so much behavior that kids engage in stems from a sense of powerlessness. Now, more importantly than all these other things, it causes them to miss many opportunities to feel better. If I walk around thinking everybody makes me feel bad, I miss a lot of opportunities to feel better. Now, so tool 3 in my toolkit approach to things is called developing an internal locus of control. Now, I truly believe that teaching kids to have an internal locus of control is the most important gift you can give your children and students. But first, you have to learn how to have an internal locus of control yourself. That's a gift you could give to yourself. Now, the way I like to explain how to get there is there's a simple formula for how life unfolds. You have events, then you add thoughts to that, and that equals your feelings. Now, anything that other people say or do is an event. Anything that happens is an event. Events can be real, or they can be imagined, or they can be remembered. They can be internal or external. But the key point is this: it takes thoughts. It's the thoughts you have about that really determine how you feel. And I like to say that thoughts cause feelings, not events. Now, so events don't equal feelings. It's what you think about them that cause how you feel. Now, if you think this is a new idea, it really isn't. Dr. Ellis came up with his theory in the 1950s, but 2,000 years ago, a Stoic philosopher called Epictetus said man is affected not by events, but by the view he takes of them. So this is not a new idea. Now, sometimes I'll add behavior to that formula too, because one of my other favorite sayings, which is crucial, is attitude is always the father of behavior. Now, I think everybody can understand the logic of the formula I just gave you. By the way, let me say one more thing. One of my frustrations is that we teach kids all kinds of formulas about how life works in math and science classes, and even English class and foreign language, and teach them how to use that knowledge to their advantage. And yet we don't teach them a formula like event plus thoughts equals feelings, something that governs every waking moment of their life. We don't teach that to them. That should be on every classroom wall in the world. Now, to understand what this formula is like, though, I think we all learn A plus B equals C. I think I learned that in 5th or 6th grade, the first time they started teaching us algebra, where A is a constant and B is a variable. And if A stays the same and you change B, C changes. Now, likewise, if we change our thoughts about an event, it changes how we feel, possibly for the better or worse, depending on what our new thoughts are. Now, Dr. Ellis's ABC theory of emotions basically goes like this. A stands for activating event. B stands for your beliefs about the event or yourself, others, and life. And C stands for consequences, or what you feel and do as a consequence of what you believe about the event, yourself, others, and life. Now, here's where the idea of it's your choice how I want to feel stems from. A fact of life is that there's always more than one way to look at anything. Now, we just went through our Republican and Democratic national conventions this week, and that was a perfect example of how people can look at the same events and come away with completely different ways of looking at them. Now, some ways will make us feel better, others will make us feel worse. Some will make it easier to deal with things we don't like, others will make it harder. That's a fact of life. Now, we also have a host of other cognitive choices beside how we look at things. One is what meaning we attach, and the meanings we attach to things is crucial. We have a choice what we want to remember at any given point in time. Some things will make us feel good, some things will make us feel bad. What we imagine is going to happen ahead of time, what we focus on. I can look in the mirror in the morning sometimes and focus on some things that depress the heck out of me and focus on other things and I feel a lot better, like my hair, for example. What we compare things to, what we expect of ourselves, others, and life ahead of time. And lastly, how much importance we attach to what does happen. Now, so choice is the source of your power and control over your emotional destiny. And by emotional destiny, we mean how you're going to feel in the next couple of seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years. So here's the logic to it. There's always more than one way to look at anything. That's a fact of life. So therefore we have a choice how we want to look at things. And because thoughts cause feelings, not events, then theoretically we have a choice how we want to feel. And one of the other ways we describe that is to say, no one upsets you, you upset yourself. Now, sometimes that doesn't come across well to people, but that's good news because that means you can choose to not upset yourself. You don't have to be at the mercy of what happens. Now, my program called Mental and Emotional Karate was my attempt to deal with the problem of bullying in schools. And I call it an inside out approach. Basically, instead of trying to stop the bullying, which sometimes is impossible, I try to harden the target or potential targets of bullying. And I teach kids to defend against mentally and emotionally against verbal and cyber attacks, like we teach kids to defend against physical attacks in karate class. Now, there's two quotes I use in this program. One is from Dr. Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a Holocaust survivor. And apparently someone along the way asked him, how did you survive all that happened to you? And he said this very famous quote, everything can be taken from us but the last of human freedoms. To choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And the short version of that is your last freedom is your attitude. Now, another one I use in this program is called from Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, no one can make you feel bad about yourself without your permission. Sometimes they substitute the word consent. Now, when we were kids, we were taught sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt you. And if you said that and repeated that to yourself, it was protective, just like I know you are, but what am I was. Now, unfortunately today, in a way to try to prevent bullying, they teach kids that words hurt and names hurt. Well, that's not scientifically accurate. That's not the way it works. So my Sticks and Stones 2.0 is to try to teach kids to get this attitude. You can think, feel, say, and do whatever you want to about me. That's your choice. But it's my choice how I look at myself and how I feel about myself. And you don't get to make those choices for me unless I let you. And I choose not to. Okay. Now, if we could get every kid to that place, we wouldn't have any problems with bullying anymore. Okay. Now, like anything else, the way to get to that place, to make it an automatic response to life events, is you have to practice, rehearse, just like you do lines to a play or a poem. Now, I want to also take some time to talk to you about the second most important thing I think we can teach people and need to. And that's part of what or embodied in what I call tool number 4, which is to recognize irrational thinking in yourself and others. Now, irrational, my simple definition of that is what you think makes you feel worse than is necessary, helpful, and what you say and do, or what you think and feel causes you to say and do things that make your life worse instead of better. Now, Dr. Ellis came up with a simple pattern for this, which is real easy to teach kids or adults. 4 basic types of irrational thinking. The first one is demandingness, and that's the important one. Then there's awfulizing, and then there's can't standarditis, which means you tell yourself, I can't stand what's happening to me, and you needlessly inflame yourself. That's why I put the itis at the end. And the last one is called label and damning. Now, to understand why that's all important, I have a tool number 1, which is understanding and appreciating the important role of emotion in everyday life. Now, I like to hyphenate the word emotion because really what it is energy to move. And the purpose of that energy to move is to help us deal with threats and get what we want and need. Now, the real underlying problem when people generate more emotion than is helpful or necessary is that they too often manufacture threats where they don't exist, or they magnify ones that do out of proportion to reality. Now, one of the quotes I like is from William Shakespeare. He says, expectation is the root of all heartache. And that's true. And I'm going to try to explain why that's true. I like to use a thermostat diagram or a metaphor to try to show people how this works. Inside our brain somewhere, we have the equivalent of what I call a think thermostat. So anytime you have 3 basic ways you can look at something. You could not care about it. You could want, prefer, and desire it, or you could think you need it, it's a necessity, and demand it. Now, within each way of looking at things, you can go from sort of to really. For example, I sort of want that, or I really want that, or somewhere in between. Now, I teach kids a couple of different rules, 5 rules. Rule number 1 is we all have the right to want whatever we want. Rather than being a parent or teacher and telling kids they should want something, I just stipulate that you have a right to want whatever you want. Saves a lot of arguments and fights. Now, the mistakes we make, according to Dr. Ellis, is that we start to think we need things we simply want. We start to treat our preferences as necessities, and we start to demand what we simply desire. If I had to describe what's going on in the United States right now, I'd say that everybody's being too demanding. Too many people are demanding that everything be the way they would like it to be. Now, rule number 2 explains why that's important. The greater the difference between our expectations and reality, the greater the perceived threat will be, and the more emotion will generate. Now, so I use a think, feel, do thermostat model because I believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's an old saying. So here's what it would look like. If I don't care about something, there's no threat if I don't get that or if I lose it. So it's easy to stay calm. There's no need for energy to move. But once I start to want, prefer, desire something, there's a possibility I might not get it or lose it. So there's a perceived threat. And how big a threat that will be will depend on how badly I want something. Okay, and then that'll cause me to generate emotions like frustration, irritation, and annoyance, or possibly concern. But if I turn my think thermostat up to need, necessity, and demand, now not getting what I wanted becomes a much bigger threat. And I'm more likely to generate anger and anxiety, which are the two emotional halves of our fight or flight response. Now, and too often what happens is people literally equate what they want, prefer, and desire to air, water, and food in their own minds. Well, if you do that, that makes not getting what you want or prefer or desire or losing it like suffocating or dying of thirst or hunger. So it magnifies the threat way out of proportion to reality. And what happens then is the effect it has on your behavior is if I want, prefer, and desire something and may not get it, and I get frustrated, irritated, annoyed, or concerned, I have energy to move, to do something about that, but I'm still relatively free to respond in the best possible way, to take consequences into consideration, to access and act on device. But once I start to turn my think thermostat up and I turn the threat level up and I generate anger and anxiety, I'm more likely to react or even overreact to what's happening. And then I don't do those things because it's like I'm trying to avoid suffocating. So the goal becomes just to get whatever I think I need right at that moment, regardless of what the consequences might be. Now, if I was truly suffocating, that would make a lot of sense. But unfortunately, that's not really, most things aren't at that threat level. Now, one of my favorite sayings as a teacher and as a human being has always been there's two ways to make something you don't like worse: do nothing and overreact to it. Now we're seeing that in the United States as far as racism. For a long time, we've done nothing, and now people are overreacting to it. Now, I like to hyphenate the word responsible and responsibility because what they really mean is to being able to respond to life in the best possible way rather than react it. Or responsibility means the ability to respond to life rather than react to it. Now, and the best way to teach responsibility or kids to be responsible is to teach them to learn how to control their think and therefore their feel and do thermostats. If we can teach them to keep their thermostats turned down, their think thermostats turned down, it will keep their feel thermostats turned down and allow them to respond to life instead of react to it. Because once they kick that up, they think thermostat up, it sets in motion something they're hardwired to do, to generate an excessive amount of emotion, start reacting instead of responding. I just want to throw two more rules out here before I finish. One rule is rule number 3. It says when people start to think they need things they simply want, it can make otherwise smart people do stupid things. And the way I explain it is very simple. If you were suffocating, what would you be willing to do to get air? Well, simple answer is anything, because I'm going to die in a few minutes if I don't. So now what happens if some young girl, for example, starts to think she not only wants, but thinks she needs a young boy's love, like she needs air, water, and food in her life? What is she likely to do to try to get that love or keep from losing it? And the answer, unfortunately, is the same thing: anything. And that's what makes otherwise smart people do stupid things. Now, and rule number 4 is one I got from Dr. Ellis himself. Behavior intended to satisfy a perceived need will win out, or I use the word trump sometimes, but not a good time to use that, will win out over behavior intended to satisfy a rational preference. And the quickest way to explain this one is give you a couple of examples. A rational preference would be wanting to quit smoking. But if I tell myself I need a cigarette, I can't go a whole day without one, my odds of quitting are pretty slim. If I'm a young girl and I want to wait till I'm married to have sex, that may be a rational preference in a lot of different ways. But if I tell myself I need my boyfriend's love and I can't live without him, and he wants to do it now, it may be really hard for me to wait until I'm married to do what I wanted to do. Now, and when you turn your think thermostat up from want, preference, and desire to need, necessity, and demand, it makes it more likely that you're going to think things are awful instead of just unpleasant, inconvenient, or uncomfortable like most things in life are. It makes it more likely you're going to engage in can't standarditis and tell yourself, I can't stand what's happening to me, instead of just saying, I don't like what is. And you're also more likely to label and damn the person, either yourself or other people, rather than just simply dislike the behavior. So because think about it, if you were suffocating, it really would be awful. It'd be the worst possible thing that could be happening. You're going to die in a few minutes, and you couldn't stand it, and the proof would be that you're going to die. But most things that we think are awful really aren't. Like my grandparents used to always tell me, it could be a lot worse. Okay. And you can stand it, you just don't like it. Okay. Now, and let's see what else I got. So tool 5, which if I had more time, I'd be glad to teach you this, is how to correct irrational thinking in yourself and challenge it in others. And like I said, these things can be found at these websites. It goes into a lot of detail. One is called the Mental Emotional Toolkit for Life. The link is itsjustanevent.com. The other one is mentalemotionalkarate.com. The third one is Teacher ESP, or Effectiveness in Stress Prevention. And finally, there's the book I just published on Amazon.com. Now, let me explain something about the book. I've got a nice pension. I'm not interested in making money. I'm interested in making a difference. So if you, for whatever reason, are a teacher somewhere and wanted to get books for a class, I think my cost to produce those books is $270. So I could buy a whole class set for you and somehow we'll pay the shipping and get it to you. So I'm not looking to make money. I'm looking to make a difference here. Now, one last thing I want to say is I always tell people this. If you can read, you can lead. If you can go to my websites and read what's there and understand it, you can lead yourself and your children and students and other people to a better mental and emotional place in life. And that's all I have to say for today.
Thank you so much. It takes courage to grow up and become who really you are, actually. So we all go through our teenage years. We all know how we experience it. We all know being a teenager, how it feels. So here I want to ask you, everyone, a question like how you feel how you feel right now, actually. We ask someone, we ask in first of all that how you feel at like pre-webinar question, that how you feel now, how you feel after listening to all the experts. We want your review. You can put it on chat box.
That was wonderful, full of great information, Ray. Thank you very much for sharing that. There was a lot of specifics in there that if you'd like to go back and see his formulas and the links to this websites, et cetera, please either go to the YouTube and you can back it up and stop it and write it down, or his PowerPoint will be available to you as well. So very good stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, exactly, sir. It's like we have a wonderful here. We have another guest speaker here with us. I would like to welcome Dr. Dimpy Mahanta. She is founding head and faculty of Department of Psychology, Cotton University, Guwahati, Assam. Ma'am, please, over to you. Dimpy, ma'am.
Yeah, my greetings to one and all present in this webinar. And in fact, I would say that it is my privilege to be a part of this webinar and listen to all the learned minds, enlightened minds, and I got a good perspective about what is emotional intelligence and they are the stalwarts in the field of emotional intelligence. So I feel really good here, and I here in my talk I would be more or less I'll be sharing my thoughts, which would be more or less similar to what our speakers have already spoken in great depth. So I hope I can
excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, Dimpy, ma'am.
Yeah.
Your voice is not clear. Can you please rearrange your headphone once again? Just arrange your earphone.
Is it okay? Better? No?
No. Please remove your earphone so that we can hear you clearly.
Hello? Am I audible?
You're audible. Please continue.
All right. Thank you. So the topic for today's webinar is emerging understanding of emotional intelligence of teenagers, and as rightly spoken in great depth by Matt, Barbara, Ray Matthews, and Subbu as well. So I would be touching on the importance of emotional intelligence, what it is, and how can we develop emotional intelligence on the teenagers. And I would also like to mention a bit about a study that has been done in India on emotional intelligence. And as far as my state, Assam, is concerned, I belong to the northeastern part of India. And here during COVID-19, we are taking certain initiatives and engaging in various governmental initiatives to help teenagers and adolescents cope with this particular pandemic better.
Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. Your voice is cracking. You have, I think you have some network issue. Can you please just sort it out so that we can hear you clearly? Because it's really right now. You're audible, ma'am. You're audible, ma'am. But if there is network issue, please switch off your video and just speak so that we can hear you clearly. Just switch off your video.
Okay, is it okay? Better?
Yeah, it's very clear. You can continue now.
All right, thank you. So now, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it is not often discussed among families or classrooms, yet it is a very important domain for adults and teenagers alike. So emotional intelligence is nothing but one's ability to be intelligent with his or her emotions. And it is the ability to use emotions effectively and productively. And more specifically, it is the ability to do the following, like recognizing, understanding, and managing one's own emotions, understanding how others might feel and why, the reason why they feel the way they do. Being empathetic, that's again, what emotional intelligence deals with, managing one's emotional reactions, and choosing a different mood or feeling, as Ray had also mentioned. You need to respond rather than react. So that is what emotional intelligence comprises of. So the term emotional intelligence was created by two researchers, Peter Salovey and John Mayer. And in 1996, Daniel Goleman, through his book on emotional intelligence, helped popularize the idea of not just being intellectually intelligent, but also emotionally intelligent. So Goleman, he spoke about the 5 key elements to it: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And the more you manage each of these areas, the higher your emotional intelligence would be. So it is becoming increasingly clear that these skills are one of the primary foundations for better performance of students in classrooms and in the society as well. And emotional intelligence provides the basis for competences important in almost every job. As they say, it's the IQ which can get you hired, but it's the EQ which will decide whether you will stay in the organization or you are fired. So while technology can aid us in learning and mastering information, it is mastering emotional intelligence where we learn to manage and master our emotions. So one of the studies which I just mentioned to you that was carried out in India in 2017 by Sekhri, Sandhu, and Sachdeva to find the relationship between EQ and academic success of teenagers in Delhi. And it was carried out on a sample of 200 students from regular schools and part-time unconventional coaching institutes. And the students ranged from 14 to 17 years of age, with the mean age of 16.21 years. And it was found that the academic score had a significant positive correlation with empathy. Empathy, as we know, it is one of the 5 key areas of emotional intelligence. So students whose emotional intelligence was more would be more competent academically as well as socially. So as we're talking about teenage periods, one of the characteristic feature of teenage period is that it's the puberty, and because of puberty there are a lot of hormonal changes take place. There is a lot of emotional, mental, psychological, physical changes that happen. And as Subbu also had mentioned about identity issues, neither they are an adult, neither they fall in the adult category, nor they are children. So often teenagers need guidance with what to do with their emotions. So with some teenagers, the emotions come out so strongly that they really do not have the tools to manage their emotions. And in worst scenario, we often see adolescents and teenagers turning towards drug or alcohol abuse, various mental ailments like depression, anxiety, mood disorders, and in extreme circumstances, as Matt had also said, it can also lead to committing suicides. So as had been broadly explained, that the main reason of why teens might lack emotional intelligence is that the teens are still developing parts of the brain that might inhibit the ability to be aware. The prefrontal cortex is still developing, and this is the part of the brain that governs reason and logic. So because for most parts the teenagers lack a fully developed prefrontal cortex, they can be emotional and they can be impulsive, and they often lack some degree of emotional intelligence. And I would not like to go too much into detail about the importance of emotional intelligence, as had already been spoken by Professor Khalid as well. For better relationships, the kids feel more confident, resilient. They are being more assertive. In fact, I carried out a workshop recently last month, where I was talking about the preventive programs on substance abuse in adolescents and teenagers. And in fact, such programs also focus on developing the social and emotional skills of adolescents. We teach them assertiveness skills, learning to say a no, and somebody was talking about anger management. That also is a very important skill that is being taught in such programs. Better relationships, how to be aware of your own emotions and how to manage your emotions, regulate your emotions. So this is why it is very, very important to have to develop the skill of emotional intelligence. As far as the present context of COVID-19 is concerned, as we all are aware, that it has affected every segment of the society, whether you talk about homemakers, elderly population, children, teenagers, just to have name. So teenagers who are able to manage their emotions are better able to cope with the stress arising out of lockdown, uncertainties during the present pandemic, and they're likely to engage in positive coping skills. And as Ray had also mentioned about powerlessness, yes, they do experience a sort of learned helplessness, which was mentioned by Seligman. So can we do something about it? We don't have vaccines, we don't have medicines yet. No, we cannot do anything about it. Can we choose our response? The answer is yes, we can choose our response. And emotional outbursts, being a part of the counseling team of my university, we have often gotten, parents calling up and saying about emotional outbursts, irritability, mood swings, amongst the adolescents, which is very common. In fact, the government of Assam had come up with Monon, an initiative where they're coming up with art competitions, online art competitions, music competitions, to channelize the emotions productively for healthier coping, for better coping, something which Barbara was also mentioning, something which I could relate to what she was saying. So there are various ways to develop emotional intelligence, and need to discuss more about emotional intelligence, talk more about it, practice emotional intelligence at home by being mindful of one's feelings. Then, parents can serve as good role models. It's not what you say to your kids, but how you make them feel. That is something which is very, very important. You need to make kindness a priority. Telling them to be kind is one thing, but letting them to see you being kind to yourself, to them, to the people to the strangers, that's where the magic is. You need to teach children how to practice listening, empathy, prioritizing relationships, and attending such workshops and trainings. They play a very important role, pursuing passion, protecting the teen brains, which Barbara also mentioned, and taking proper rest and sleep. It is very, very important. At the end, I would just like to say that it is important to keep in mind that, like any other skills that grows over time, emotional intelligence is also a skill. It's like working out in a gym. Those muscles, that biceps and triceps, quadriceps that you develop, it takes time, isn't it? So in the same way, emotional intelligence is a skill which requires time. You need to persevere. You need to have patience. And it may take a few months, sometimes years, to grow stronger. So teenagers need to be provided with the skills that are required, that would in turn enable them to achieve both personal as well as professional successes. And emotional intelligence, let me tell you, it's not optional or supplemental, but it has to be made an integral part of our education system. And as educators and academicians, I strongly feel that, it is one of our most critical jobs to prepare our students for the world of adulthood, a global community requiring sophisticated understanding of not just ourselves, but also of other people, their motives, their perspectives, capabilities, and desires. And in short, what we had our previous speaker also mentioned about what we call as, self-actualized, fully functioning individuals. With these words, I thank all of you for being patient listeners, and thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dimpy ma'am. You really well said that emotional intelligence needs patience, time, and everything. It is a most needed in right now. So I would like to welcome our last but not the least invited speaker, Swaha Mitra Basu. Let's welcome Miss Basu. She is psychological counselor and dance movement therapy practitioner working with NGOs and organizations for last 3 years. Over to you, ma'am.
A warm welcome to all the participants and all the keynote speakers, guest of honors. I'm Swaha. So I basically work with NGOs. So in the webinar, I see everything has been covered on what emotional intelligence is, how the adolescent's brain goes. So I would like, Nandini, can you just please share the PPT that I shared with you?
Sure, ma'am. Just wait for some minutes.
Sure, thank you. So since I work with children, teenagers, so I thought of putting it in a very brief, very simple words that all the keynote speakers have already touched base on these. The second slide, please. So we'll start with what emotional intelligence is all about, because as Dr. Dimpy said, like, it is not discussed in a daily circumstances. It is not a thing that is discussed every day, normally in Indian context, I would say. So you can say it's an emotional intelligence, refers to the ability to perceive, control, and to evaluate the emotions. Next slide, please. Nandini, next slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. Next is a very quick what an adolescence is. It is a transition stage between the childhood and adulthood. And this is where the main conflict is. An adolescent is in a constant conflict whether they should mix with the children group or with the adult group. When they go and suppose in a playground, when they are out to play, the children, the child group do not accept them. And when they focus or give their opinion in an adult discussion, they are not even treated well. They are in a constant conflict at where their exact position is. Nandini, next slide, please. Okay, as Dr. Dimpy said, the 5 components are, I just put as a very simple form, it's a self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. I do agree that many of the keynote speakers and the guests of honors are from a psychological background. I work only with art therapy and with counseling. So these can be of a very grassroots level to other people, but this is what I wanted to show and help people understand what it's all about. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what I want really to focus on, is the level of emotional intelligence. So normally we have 4. First is perceiving your emotion. That is that you have to understand, be aware of what your emotions are. Then reasoning with emotions, whether the emotion that you are showing or portraying is actually normal or not. Next is understanding your emotion. And the last is managing your emotions. Next slide, please. Okay, the basic characteristics of a teenager mind, as we were discussing the brain component. So basically the characteristics of a teenager are they are impulsive. They misunderstand the emotion and social cues. This is because we do not have a two-way communication in our society. They have accident of physical fights. Again, they have a tendency to show their strength and superiority. Next, they take risk and often go to choices. Either they go on drugs or anything that is not acceptable in the society. Next slide, please. And why it is emotional intelligence is important, as Dr. Dimpy rightly said. We'll just go through quickly just to read, because it allows us to understand, manage our emotions in order to self-motivate and to create positive social interactions. It is the first step in realizing our true potentials. Next slide. I've pointed out 5 importance of emotional intelligence in this slide. First one is the values and benefits of emotional intelligence in personal, academic, and professional success. We won't be focusing on professional because since we are discussing only with teenagers, we will only restrict in personal and academics. Next slide, please. I think Dimpy ma'am has already focused on these 2 issues about emotional intelligence and their IQ levels. Next slide. Then you can just skip to the slide where I have shared art therapy. Yes, the next one, please. The next slide, where I have a figure, a diagram. Okay. So basically we have learned, like, we can use REBT, we can use social skills. We can also use art therapy in order to help a child or a teenager in emotional intelligence. How art therapy works. Art therapy has a wide range. So it can improve cognition, sensory motors, self-awareness, enhancing skills, reducing conflict, improving their insight. And next slide, please, the last slide. Okay, so there are many art therapy activities that we can use to help a child or a teenage to work on their emotional intelligence. First is the postcard activity. In the postcard activity, we normally ask a child, maybe an adolescent, I won't say a child, an adolescent, to write in a postcard how he would introduce himself to someone else. This would focus how he perceives his strength and his weaknesses, and how he wants other people to recognize him. Next is Words to Live by Collage. If anyone has any question, please type it in the chat box and Nandini will just help you with it. In Words to Live by Collage is, we have newspapers, magazines in the house. We just give those to the teenage, ask them to pick out words from those magazines and newspaper and paste it as how he reflects. For the things that I've written on the slide, you need not take the child or the teenage to the therapist. A parent, an educator can also help him to understand where he is emotionally. The most important and the best activity that I like is the softness project. So here what we do is, we take some harsh cloth or material, maybe rug, and some soft cloths like cotton, silk. First, we use the harsh material on the person's hand, just to make them feel how harshness impacts their body. We use it as a metaphor. Like when you use harsh words, this is how the person in front of you feel inside. Next, we use the soft cloth, maybe cotton or silk, to give them an impression. Like if you speak softly, this is how it reflects on the person how you speak. Next is build a safe place activity. Here we basically focus on our space. Normally, if you remember in the slides I shared previously, it was there, like in teenagers, they have thing of keeping up physical fight. They pick up physical fight very soon. Just to ensure them that they have a space where they can help in free movement without hurting each other, and to focus on peer group development, we use these kind of activities. Next is what is in your heart. Normally, any educator, any parents who are now on the webinar, present webinar, even you can also do it. Draw on a piece of paper a big heart. It need not be artistic. Now write in those what things you are holding on to them. It may be your positive emotions or your negative emotions. Try to understand and talk to your elders or someone who is doing the same activity with you as why these things are there in your heart. You need not focus on the positive, but on the negatives, and work on it, how you can take away those negative emotions without hurting yourself much. The last one is the self-care box. It is a concept that was developed in the United Kingdoms. Like we have first aid box, it's the same like a self-care box. We keep things like when we have a psychological first aid, teenagers are asked there to keep a piece of cloth, their favorite music, pictures, a journal, colorful pens, so that whenever they feel low, they just can go back to them and have a self-care kit for them. They can write, express. Normally, they don't try to verbalize. This is a problem because they find it when they are open about their opinions, people are there to judge them. There is no one to listen to them empathetically. There is no one to understand them. So self-care box is kind of a box that can help themselves to understand their emotions. Any questions as of now? Because I am at the last of the slide. I gave a very brief because maximum things were being covered by all the previous keynote speakers. Nandini, you can just put the screen down. Thank you. Yes, anyone have any questions?
Excellent presentation. Very good concepts, ideas.
Art therapy nowadays is like emerging field where we can express, we can emotional catharsis can be done on paper, and it's
Absolutely,
really wonderful.
Because Nandini, what I've seen is, I'm sorry to cut you short here. Teenagers have this conflict of, if I express my opinions to this person or to my parents, people will judge me, and I don't have a safe space. So art therapy is something with art. Every person loves to color or paint. Even if I give you a crayon box, you will start scribbling. So scribbles have their own meaning. So we can understand, like, this scribble means this. This child is going through this. And then we can always go for a talk therapy. Like, why you did this? Yes.
The thing is, we not only teenagers, from children to adult, from old age, everyone can express their ideas, express their emotions on a paper, on a piece of paper with wonderful colors. We can say that art is the meeting ground of the world inside and the world outside.
True.
Thank you so much, Swaha ma'am, for this wonderful practices that you have given. So
thank you very much,
here we have our last invited speaker. Now I want to ask you some questions. Can we have questions, please?
Nandini, I think you had a question from Amisha. Yeah.
Wait, I have to check.
Misha, go ahead, please.
Please. If anyone has any question, please unmute yourself and talk to. You can talk to our experts.
I was not having question. I was about to express a view that when we are kids, we love crayons and we forget that those crayon boxes when we grow up, and those classes and everything, because small thing play a very big role in our life, whether it is art, whether it is dancing.
Yes, art, dancing, and even if you like, everyone is now onto positive psychology, and they have this called a gratitude therapy, where you say thank you even to yourself. We do not express the tiniest things that we think that it should be we should be thankful for. When was the last time you thanked yourself? When was the last time you thanked your eyes and ears? We never do that. This is how we build empathy to and accept ourselves. When was the last time you stood in front of the mirror and you just patted yourself compassionately? We hardly do that. Matt, when was the last time you did that?
Been a while. I'll try it today.
We never do it.
Yeah, when we are kids, we
Good.
are asked to clap for ourselves when we do good. Like I'm a teacher, I'm a music teacher, so I ask my students to clap for themselves that they played very good at the end of the session. So they feel very good for that thing. So
Yes.
that is the thing. Like we should appreciate ourselves.
So when was the last time you clapped for yourself for cooking something very good? Or just dressing up, you dressed up very good. You felt good. When was the last time you clapped for yourself? At this age, you never did.
I have to remember.
Can I tell a quick story?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Could I tell a quick story real quick? Thank
Yeah.
you. When I have cancer and I was in the hospital getting a stem cell transplant and I lost all my hair and everything, but while we were in the rooms, what they did, they came around with a little cart and they had crayons, as you mentioned, Amisha, and coloring books for people. And I was like, that's kind of silly, but it's not. They said that scientifically they've found that drawing with the crayons, especially in larger, some people find it useful to do the very small, but in larger motion like that is one of the most meditative behaviors that we can do, and is incredibly healing in itself. And one of the things that I love about most of the emotional intelligence tools is very, very inexpensive, if not free. So I appreciate art therapy now, Swaha.
Yes.
Actually, when we talk about the anger management also, we go with the crayons and we go with the scribble thing. I always tell my students about that. As I'm a counselor, I counsel the child with anger management or having hyperactive issues. I always counsel them to, if you feel bad, if you feel anger, if you feel sad, you just take a pen, a paper, and scribble it. You will feel relaxed. It's really very empathetic. It's really very cathartic. So thank you so much for your views. Anyone want to ask anything or want to put their views? Please unmute yourself. It's an interactive session. We are in between one-to-one sessions, so it's open for all. You can ask anything.
I think it was such a wonderful session that we don't have some doubts.
Yeah.
I know. Everything is clear.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful feedback, actually.
We got some very good feedback. I appreciate that. I'm looking in the chat. Looks like Aditya said, could you asked Swaha if you could explain the build a safe place activity just a little bit more, please.
Or ma'am, can we do some activity of art therapy here?
Yes, definitely. I'm all ready for it. Anyone can see me right now? So
yes.
We can just move
No, ma'am. You are not visible.
Okay, sorry. Just a minute. Okay. So how we do a safe space? Just expand your arms sideways. So this is my positive space. So anything that is in my positive space is my safe space.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So how we do is, suppose we work in pairs with this. So I will come close to you. So nearer you can come to me. This is my safe space. You cannot come in my interpersonal, in my, what do you call it, in my region. You can just move away. Like if I, wait, suppose if I'm moving, so I can move. If I have someone, they can come, go from here without touching me. So this is my safe space. They can intrude in my negative space, not in my positive space. Only if you come and hit me on my positive space, you are trying to, what do you call it? You're coming in my space. So you can always explore my negative space. If you're playing with kids, ask them to can move from under my arms. If you're standing like with your feet wide open, tell them you can just crawl. You cannot touch each other's positive space. This is how we teach us your safe space. My positive space is my safe space.
We call it our comfort zone. That's our comfort zone, and it is our space to be ours. While we have our arms up, I have another one you mentioned about acknowledging ourselves. If you put your arm out straight in front of you, take either of your arms, put your arm out straight in front of you with your palm up, with your palm, or no, your palm down, right? So now turn and put your palm up, okay? And then bend at the elbow.
Yes.
Here. And give yourself a little pat on the back.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Actually, we call it our own bubble. Actually, it's kind of bubble around us, and we are enjoying our own bubble. And now, Mr. Matt has already told us how we can pat ourselves in our own bubble. So it's really great. Thank you so much. Yeah, anyway, that's really awesome, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot. So I want to ask some few questions. Can I?
Sure.
Okay. So here are the questions in your screen.
Oh.
So I can recognize my emotion as I experience them. Can we recognize? What's your opinion?
I am able to recognize my emotions.
Yes.
My guess is it needs to be a little more specific because we can recognize some emotions and some we hide from ourselves and
we will come to that. We will come to that.
Okay.
So the results are yes, 87.5% participants say yes, and 6.2 are no, and 6.2 are not sure. So next question. Here is next question. Wait a minute. Here is next question. I find it difficult to move on when I feel frustrated or unhappy.
Sometimes.
We all have our difficulties to move on.
Depends on the subject.
No, sometimes, but if you take and do a breathe regulatory movement exercise, take an inhale and just let it go. So it's easy.
So the results are yes, 52.5% are rated yes, and 35% rated no, and 12.5% rated not sure. So it's like we are all confused whether we have to express some of the emotion, whether we know some of the emotions or not. So for all this question, I would like to request Mr. Matt Pellenstein to come over and please sort out all the kind of doubts and conclude this session. Over to you.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Amisha, you are asking something? Yeah, please you unmute yourself. You are open now.
Able to move on from your emotions. So I want to ask, like, as I am a musician, whenever I feel very much angry, as I know that I get very much angry sometimes, so I come and sit near my piano and start playing piano, and I forget my emotion. So can I say that I'm an escapist, or I'm using the right technique, or I'm using the wrong technique for that?
Is it hurting anybody?
No.
There's a
Is it
difference.
working for you?
My anger.
Okay, there's a difference between, Dr. Ellis used to make a distinction between getting better and temporarily feeling better. There's a lot of ways to temporarily feel better. Some are healthy, some aren't. What you do is a healthy one. Obviously, you could go out and smoke, drink, and do other things. But the only way to really get better, which means to permanently reduce the frequency, intensity, and duration of feelings like anger, is to learn to change the way you think. And the way to do that is to understand what thoughts you have in the first place that cause you to be angry. For example, anger usually comes from making demands of others. And basically you're saying that everything or everybody has to be the way I want it to be. Now, when I put it that way, how old does that sound? It sounds like a child throwing a temper tantrum. So basically when everybody gets angry, Dr. Ellis used to say it's an adult throwing a temper tantrum. So my question would be for you is to recognize that you're having those demands saying that everything has to be the way I want. Well, my question would be, why does it have to be the way you want? Why does everybody have to do or be the way you want them to be? And the answer to that obviously is they don't. It's okay for you to want that. That's perfectly part of being human. That's your right as a human being. But the reality of life is everybody also has their own right to be the way they want to be and want things to be the way they want. And it's not always going to be the way we want it to be.
Very
So
rightly answered.
if you really want to get better, now there's nothing wrong with having ways to temporarily feel better, but that's why people become addicted to things. You could become addicted to anything, where people become addicted to exercise, which is good for you, and then they end up with injuries and things like that because they learn real quickly. The only time I feel good is when I'm doing that thing or when I'm high or something like that. So, but the trick is to get better, which means to permanently reduce the frequency, intensity, and duration of emotions you don't like having. And the way to do that is to change the way you think.
I have to change it. I understood this very well. I was with that kind of confusion from quite a long time. Like people say that drinking is very bad, but when I am continuously playing piano, when I feel bad, so at that time also I used to think that whether I'm using the right technique or not. But today I got to know the answer. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Great answer, Ray. Getting better versus feeling better. That's huge right there. We got some wonderful comments. We got some wonderful feedback. I hope you found this useful. I sure did. I learned a lot. I've been taking notes like crazy. I've been writing as fast as I can the whole time almost. And I was very impressed with the presentations today. One of the things I would ask of you guys is that what we call each one teach one EQ. I feel like it's our responsibility, as now that we know emotions, now that we know some about EQ, is to share that. Please share what you know. Most people do not know what we know, and people are dying quite literally to know what we know about emotions. They do not know, and they don't know how to find out. They don't even know that they don't know. You know what I mean? So it's our responsibility as we find this out to share with other people. And I mean, any other people, it doesn't matter who it is, if it's your little brother or your mom or someone in the street or your clients or anybody, it doesn't matter who, just please share what you know. We are consciously and actively trying to educate the world on emotions. It's a slow and long process. There's a lot to it. As you've heard, every one of these presenters could have gone on and on and on with the more and more information on emotional intelligence. There's so much to it. Most of it is pretty simple, but sometimes it's not easy. And there's so much to it that requires continuous study. As Dr. Khalid said at the very beginning of this, it is not a short-term fix. It is something that we need to practice over time. So please find out what you can, follow the links, talk to people, read, do what you need to do to find out about you first, and spread that information with others. And another cool part about emotions is we can share our own journey while we're helping people in a way that helps people. We can grow with people as we go. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And as Barb mentioned earlier, a lot of this stuff is free. Most EQ is free, just most of it. So please look in the chat. Nandina is recording this. It's on YouTube, so you can back it back up. Nandina, please save the chat. There's some wonderful information in there.
Sure.
There's a feedback link she put up recently. Swaha just put up her PowerPoint up there about art therapy. Another great thing. I don't really pay much attention to that, but I will now, because once again, how much does art therapy cost? Most of the time, we have a pencil and a pen, and we write it down, or we have crayons or whatever. Go to it, and express yourself, get it out. So awareness is first, acceptance of what we feel is second, and then expression, get it out, especially the negative emotions, fear, anger, sadness. If we can deal with our fear, our anger, and our sadness, there isn't much that life can throw at us that we can't handle. Think about that. If you can handle the big three, fear, anger, and sadness, you can handle anything. So keep practicing and keep sharing about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for wonderful, sort out some wonderful ideas and advice. And now I think we are clear about the emotional intelligence part, that first we have to accept them, then we have to think about them, then we have to express them. So be expressive. We don't need anyone to express our emotion. Actually, we can did it by ourselves also. If you are free to, if you have some emotion which is continuously bothering you, you can just pen it down. You can tell yourself in front of a mirror. You can express yourself by writing diary or everything. You don't need anyone. Like I can't share my things. I can't share my feelings to anyone. It's not like that. You are sufficient for your emotions. Thank you so much. Now, to conclude this, I would like to request our chief guest, Dr. M.A. Khalid sir, please come over and please conclude the whole meeting. Over to you. Khalid sir? Sir, you are mute. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Nandini, first. Yeah. And thank you also, Mr. Matt, for contributing the valuable EI, who is vast experience, as well as Mr. Ray Matz, and also, I think, Barbara as well, Swata, and Dimpy. All well said and explained. Main thing is that acceptability. People doesn't want to accept. That is the most negative things. We have to accept. As already said, everything is explained very clearly. Accept sadness. We might feel sometimes real sad. One is we have to be emotion in certain times. That's real emotion in a sad place. We empathize. It does not mean that we'll continue it. We'll write down. Everything is spoke to you. Really, I'm proud of our speakers, as selected by Matt as well. And I also selected few ones from India. Excellent. So I will request every participant, as well as anybody, can share with via email, which you don't. So many things to know. It is not enough 3 hours or 2 hours to learn everything. It's need to be practiced.
Exactly.
So we have to inquire through email ID and also Viber, whatever the things. That's the main thing, because I'm very much proud of the US people. Resource person, professors, so senior. I could expect that they are with us. It's a proud of all of us. Thanks to everybody. Thanks. Next, we'll be meeting. I don't know. Matt knows everything. We'll be meeting shortly with another topics. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Before we go, Nandini, can we just all say goodbye? Maybe everybody, can you unmute everybody and people say goodbye? Maybe turn your camera on just for a second so we can
exactly.
see you.
I'm actually about that only. Please turn on your cameras, and so that we can pat. But first of all, pat yourself with both the hands. Just unmute yourself first. Please unmute yourself. Just with both the hands for acquiring such a wonderful session and giving such a wonderful time. So tap yourself with both the hands and clap for yourself and say goodbye. And please give us feedback. Please give us feedback so that we can improve our webinars. And sorry for taking so much of your time. And thank you for listening us passionately. And we are very glad that you give us your valuable time. Thank you so much to our chief guests, to our speakers, to our everyone. Please, yes, Mr. Matt.
Thank you.
I wanted to say something.
Thank you. See you. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Matt, sir, you want to say something?
I thought Barb did, but off we go. So again, thank you all. Take care. Ready to.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
You get to choose what you think and feel. You get to choose what you think and feel.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big deal.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, everyone. And speakers from USA, have a good day ahead. We will meet soon. And please give us feedback. And in fact, you can, it is available on YouTube also. The link is already given to you. You can subscribe it for more updates on the whole mental health thing. Thank you so much.